Okay, so for this video, we're going to talk about how do ionic bonds form. Make sure that you're taking notes and write down all of the examples that are listed here. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to talk about, if we review, we know that atoms want to fill their outer shell or their valence shell, and they all want to have 8. Remember, this is your octet rule. So the question is, how do we know how many valence electrons each element has? So the first thing you want to do is, if we remember, group 1, so we see the 1 here, has 1 valence electron. Group 2 has 2. Remember, we're going to skip these guys here in the middle, and then we're going to go over here to group 13, and for group 13, remember, it has 3. Group 14 has 4 valence electrons, 15 has 5, 16 has 6, and 17, 7. Group 18 has 8. Remember the one thing that we want to talk about here? These guys with group 18 are typically stable, so we don't see those react very often. Alright, so let's draw a couple of our Lewis dot structures. So let's go with lithium. And remember, when we were drawing these, we said that it has 1 valence electron. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that 1 valence electron there. And then let's take something like bromine. And we know that this is in group 17. So it's going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 valence electrons. Okay? And so what's going to end up happening is we know that lithium, because it's got 1, it's easier, it takes less energy for it to lose 1, so it's going to lose 1, okay? And then your bromine over here is going to gain 1, and these are electrons that we're talking about, okay? So this electron is going to leave, and it's going to go right over here to bromine, so that when we write this, what we end up getting is my lithium lost an electron. So instead of having, so it's over here, it's got 3 protons and it's got 3 electrons, right? And it loses that 1 electron. So now it's going to have 3 protons, 2 electrons. Therefore, its overall charge is going to be a 1 plus. So let's go ahead and put the plus charge there. And then I take my bromine, okay? And my bromine now has the original 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and then the 1 that I added to it. So bromine had 35 protons and 35 electrons originally. And remember, we said that it gained 1 electron, right? So in this case, it's now going to have 35 protons, and it's going to have 36 electrons, which means 35 positives and 36 negatives means that it has an extra negative, so it has a 1 minus charge. So we're going to put a 1 minus there. But now when you write this, you're actually going to write LIBR. We don't write any of the charges in there, okay? Alright, so let's try another example. Let's take barium, and let's take barium, and to barium we are going to add, let's go with oxygen in this case, okay? So we've got barium, we've got oxygen, so what I want you to draw in the first place, you're going to have your electrons for barium, it's in group 2, so it's got 1, 2, okay? And then we're going to go with our oxygen, it's in group 16, and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 electrons there, okay? So what we're going to see happening is these 2 electrons are going to leave and they're going to go over there with oxygen, okay? So barium in this case, it's going to lose 2 electrons, so we're going to say it's minus 2 electrons, which means it's going to become barium 2 plus because it lost 2 electrons. And my oxygen, which gained, let me get a plus there, 2 electrons, is now going to have a 2 minus charge. So my oxygen is now going to be oxygen with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and let me erase this one. There's my 6, right? And then I added 2 electrons, so the 2 electrons that are right here, okay? And so we're going to put those 2 electrons in, and we can see that it now has a total of 8. So this is going to be O, 2 minus, okay? And so now when we write the formula for this, we're just going to write BaO, okay? And the reason we write just Ba and O is because if you look here, we only have 1 barium and we only have 1 oxygen, okay? So now let's go to a little bit more difficult one. So now let's look if we have something like, let's go with aluminum plus, and let's add sulfur, okay? So aluminum has, it's in group 13, so it has 1, 2, 3 valence electrons, and sulfur has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because again, this is in group 16, so it has a total of 6. All right, so what I want to do then, I'm going to show that my electrons, aluminum wants to lose those 3 electrons, and so it's going to add these 2 to sulfur. All right, so here's the problem. It's added these 2 electrons to sulfur, which needed 2 electrons here, right? But it has this one little electron left over. So the only thing we can do is we need to get rid of this 1 electron. So we need to add an entire another sulfur. So let me draw my other sulfur here. And it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to take this electron and I'm going to hand it over. Now, aluminum's lost all its electrons. The first sulfur gained 2. It's happy because it now has 8. My next sulfur, it needs 1 more. So I have to add another aluminum. Okay. So we got 1, 2, 3 electrons. One of these electrons is going to go to that sulfur. Now, the problem is this aluminum still has 2 electrons left. So what's the next thing I need to do? You got it. I have to add another sulfur. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 electrons. And now this electron is going to go here from aluminum. This electron is going to go here. And so what I end up with is, if we look at this, I've got 2 aluminums. Okay? And I've got 1, 2, 3 sulfurs. Okay? So I've got 2 aluminums, and they have a 3 plus charge, because remember they lost 3 electrons, and I've got 3 sulfurs, and they have a 2 minus charge, because remember each time they're gaining 2 electrons. So my formula for this would be Al2S3. Okay, in the last example we're going to go to, we're going to look at, let's look at calcium. Okay, and we're going to say calcium plus, in this case, let's go with fluorine. So remember, calcium has 2 valence electrons, okay, and fluorine has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So we are going to show these 2 electrons. One of them going here. Okay, so now that fluorine is filled up, so we need to add another fluorine. And again, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, and we're going to add this second one over here. And so what we end up with is calcium, which lost 2 electrons, is going to be a 2 plus charge. And then each fluorine gained 1 electron. So we're going to have plus 2 fluorines, okay, with their 1 minus charge. And so my formula for this would be CaF, and we put a 2 down there. Okay? Okay, so the wrap-up thing is, when we talked about oxidation numbers, but you didn't know we were doing this, these are the numbers of electrons that an atom has gained or lost. And so what we're going to do is we're going to write them above the groups. And so if you remember, we called this group 1 had 1 valence electron, group 2 had 2 valence electrons, group 13 had 3 valence electrons, 14, 4, 15, 5, 16, 6, 17, 7, and 18 had a total of 8. So now what we're going to do, I'm going to show you, is that when group 1 loses 1 electron, okay, they're going to end up with a +1 charge. Group 2, right here, they're going to lose 2 electrons. Remember, electrons are negatively charged, and so if they lose 2 negatives, they become +2. Okay? Group 13, as you may have guessed, will be a +3. For right now, we are not going to do anything with group 14, so we're going to skip group 14, okay? And then let's go back to group 15. This is going to be a -3. Group 16 is going to be a -2. Group 17, a -1. And for the most part, this group 18, they don't want to gain or lose any electrons, so we're going to say they're 0. Now, this isn't exactly true, but we'll talk later about which one of the noble gases actually react. So just to make sure that you guys understand these numbers that we have up here, these are our oxidation numbers, okay? And we're going to use those when we talk about naming ionic and covalent, well, for the most part, ionic compounds. All right, and so the last thing I want to say to you is, what are the little numbers? So when we had our example like this, which was Al2O3, or if we have something like BAF2, okay? These little numbers right down here, these are what we call subscripts, okay? And these we get, these we're going to use, these tell us the number of atoms that we have. So this tells us how many oxygens that are there, or in this case, how many fluorines are there. And remember, if we don't see a number, right here, we assume it's 1. Okay? And how do we find them? Remember, this came from the fact that we needed 2 Al3 pluses and we needed 3 O2 minuses. Okay? So you can go back to your notes and you can look at that. But that's where these came from. These were the numbers that we had out here.